Hello everybody, it's almost over. This is one of the best parts of the meeting actually, because you can see what's happened in all the other tracks. And those things you couldn't get to see, and we've got an amazing group of rapporteurs. So first of all, good evening and welcome to the Rapporteur and Closing session. And over the next hour, we're going to hear what our lead rapporteurs, who have worked tirelessly with their teams this week, what they've captured, and they've hopefully all the key highlights from our 4 scientific tracks. And then we're going to directly commence the closing session, where we're going to have a community statement and closing remarks from our incredible, wonderful conference co-chairs. But first, I have the honour to introduce the French Minister of Higher Education, Research and Innovation, Madame la Ministre Frédérique Vidal, to the stage. Thank you, Minister Vidal.
Dear President of the IAS, Professor Linda Gale-Baker, dear President and past President of the ANRS, Professor François Daby and Professor Jean-François Delfressé, dear Professor Françoise Barré-Sinoussi, distinguished presidents and representatives of NGOs, dear colleagues. I am deeply honored to close this 9th International AIDS Society Conference. When closing this conference, I would like first to salute the commitment of François Daby, Jean-François Delfressé, and Françoise Barré-Sinoussi in co-organizing your conference this year, putting France at the forefront of worldwide AIDS research, and for having brought you to France for the 3rd time. The history of AIDS over the last 30 years is an exemplary paradigm of the necessary alliance between science, civil society, and policymakers. This conference has again been an example of the multidisciplinary approach necessary to beat back transmission, to develop treatments, to make them available and acceptable, and to ensure integration for people living with HIV. The plenary sessions of this conference have taken us from molecular biology to social sciences and humanities, economics, or political studies. Just about every academic discipline has contributed to our understanding of AIDS over the last 30 years and was represented in your conference. The main results will be summarized in this closing session, but I would like to outline briefly some of the issues you have discussed. Basic sciences produce new concepts and improve our understanding of physiopathology, and tremendous advances in the understanding of host-virus interactions have been made and shared during your conference. These results provide the basis for innovation and drug development in cooperation with the pharmaceutical industry. Clinical trials provide reliable data as to which strategies are most efficient. They have shown the added value of early treatment, and this adds to the need of efficient screening policies. They also allow the assessment of intermittent treatments or innovative therapies. Economists provide data which help us approach the cost effectiveness of different strategies in different settings. Social sciences and humanities provide concepts and data necessary to understand the determinants of screening strategies and the treatment compliance. They provide insight on important issues such as the quality of life of people living with HIV in their communities and the mechanisms underlying discrimination. Our country decided in 1988 to create a dedicated agency to promote, coordinate and fund the multidisciplinary program on HIV/AIDS and later on viral hepatitis with a strong connection with patients' representatives. Reductions in the incidence of AIDS have been made possible by the decisive involvement of civil society. From the very beginning, patient associations have played a leading role in the fight against AIDS, including in research. In France, it was no doubt the role of patient associations in this particular field that triggered and then sped up a general movement of dialogue between patient associations, researchers, and public authorities, leading to the co-construction of policies. The dialogue between NGOs and politicians remains the cornerstone on which to build the future of research. The IAS has been funded with a specific annual budget for grants of some 50 million euros, not to mention the permanent support of our research centers and of our research organisms, such as INSERM, in that field. From the beginning of the epidemics, it became obvious that AIDS was a global threat for mankind and required a global answer. France was at the forefront in creating, in 2003, the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, tuberculosis, and malaria, and is the second largest donor. France has also made a major contribution to international research by implementing, in collaboration with colleagues worldwide, and especially in Africa and Southeast Asia, clinical trials tackling specifically the needs of these countries. 20% of the budget of our national agency is devoted to funding of research in lower-income countries. As an example, at this conference, the ANRS TAC trial in Senegal has been presented. Lastly, as a policymaker, I would like to underline that the fight against AIDS has been a shining example of the success of evidence-based policies. We can talk about successes when the life expectancy of treated patients approaches that of the general population, when mother-to-child transmissions decrease, when the number of patients treated with combined ART increases. But let's make it clear, the epidemic is not under control, and we need to maintain our efforts if we are to achieve the 1990-90 UNAIDS objectives and to reach the 95-95-95 one. Beyond that objectives, we want to achieve HIV eradication. Therefore, we need a vaccine, we need a cure, we need science. In other words, science must continue to support this challenge, and we must give it the tools to do. As stated by our President, France will remain highly committed to the objective of eradicating the HIV by 2013. Commitment means supporting research, promote international collaboration, and give financial support. My ministry will encourage and support all researchers in this field, from social and human sciences to support health prevention policies, to basic science and biology, new technologies that will bring new concepts and therapeutic innovations. I wish you all an excellent and safe return home and hope to see you again at the next conference with even more proposals and solutions. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, Ministre Vidal. And now we're going to move to the community address. And this is going to be given by Ottoman Melouk, who's a treatment activist from Morocco. He's the founder of the International Treatment Preparedness Coalition in the Middle East and North Africa, and the co-chair of the Global Forum on MSM and HIV. He's also a member of the WHO Strategic and Technical Advisory Committee, the STAC, on HIV and hepatitis. But today, Ottoman is the lead on intellectual property and access to medicines at the International Treatment Preparedness Coalition, ITPC, a global network of people living with HIV and their advocates working together to achieve access to HIV and hepatitis therapies. It's my great pleasure to invite you to the podium. Ottoman.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. There is a scandal at this conference that we AIDS activists and hepatitis activists feel compelled to speak about today. Gilead Science is funding this conference and making a lot of positive public relations, while we all know that its pricing policy leaves millions of people out of life-saving treatments. Gilead's prices for hepatitis drugs are outrageously high. With their $1,000 pill, they have wrecked government budgets and pushed patients in developed countries to run from country to country in their desperate bid to get hold of sofosbuvir. They are charging $32,000 in France, $12,000 in Malaysia, $4,500 in Brazil, and in most countries, these prices cannot be afforded either by governments, by people, nor by insurance schemes. And when a country like Ukraine tries to register a cheaper and more affordable version, generic version of the drug, they sue them for millions of dollars in private arbitration. Gilead presents itself as the responsible pharmaceutical company, the one that really cares. They give voluntary licenses, after all, to generic companies to supply drugs in the developing world. In reality, Gilead's licenses are not about access. They are about denial. They exclude millions of people in middle-income countries. These licenses are a smokescreen that in reality create monopolies where patents don't exist and where Gilead has no rights. Licenses are also for Gilead a diabolic strategy to control production of raw materials and strangle local independent generic manufacturers. Leaving millions of patients without access to sofosbuvir was not enough for Gilead. Even as the licensed generic made their way into some developing countries, governments, doctors, hospitals, treatment providers, and generic companies were asked to make lists of patients to collect old empty bottles before giving the next one. The violation of patient privacy was extraordinary. Their greed insatiable. Gilead wants to count every single dose sent out. Heaven forbid it falls into the wrong hands and saves a life in an excluded country. The right to privacy be damned, medical ethics be damned, and certainly patients desperate for sofosbuvir be damned. Truvada, but let me ask you to use the generic name. Let's not become Gilead's brand ambassadors. Tenofovir emtricitabine has been approved for pre-exposure prophylaxis. For the gay community and other key population, this is a life-saving development. For Gilead, it was an opportunity to file additional evergreen patents and exploit our communities. In several countries, Gilead genuinely managed to abuse from the patent system, seeking additional protection certificates beyond the legal duration of the tenofovir emtricitabine patents. Today, in several countries, including here in France, generic producers are ready to enter markets with more affordable versions of the drug that is urgently needed to scale up access to PrEP. In a meeting yesterday with European activists, Gilead alleged that they will likely block such generics and prevent millions of people from accessing the effective prevention tool that is PrEP. And lastly, we have all been touched yesterday by the call of our colleague Jesus Aguais from Venezuela. During the conference, he met several pharmaceutical companies who committed to support the desperate people of Venezuela, except one, Gilead. They didn't even dare to respond to his several requests to meet. So today, Gilead's true face is exposed for all the world to see. We request from Gilead to drop the prices and stop excluding people from middle-income countries from accessing life-saving drugs. We request from Gilead to stop blocking local manufacturing and registrations of generics of sofosbuvir and tenofovir emtricitabine. We urge Gilead to respect the initial duration of the patents that are expiring now and to stop pressuring patent offices worldwide to obtain abusive patents just like they shamefully did recently in India. So Gilead, free the cure, free PrEP, support the people of Venezuela. Thank you.
Thank you, Ottoman. And now it's time for our sessions of reviewing what's happened at the conference. And I'm going to introduce our Track A lead rapporteur, Matthias Lichterfeld. Now, Matthias is an infectious disease physician at the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, an associate professor at Harvard Medical School. His scientific work focuses on analyzing viral reservoirs and developing clinical strategies for HIV cure and eradication. Matthias received his medical degree from the University of Heidelberg in Germany, and he completed residency and infectious disease fellowship training at Mass General and the Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston. Please welcome Matthias to the stage.
Good. So before I get into the details of the conference, I briefly wanted to use this opportunity to thank the scientific committee from Track A for organizing this very interesting and diverse spectrum of presentations at this meeting. It really reflects that we are at an exciting time for HIV research from a basic science perspective. So I'm going to start by showing a couple of presentations on basic science virology of HIV infection. There were a number of presentations here at this meeting showing that clonal expansion of HIV-infected CD4 cells is a very potent mechanism that stabilizes and maintains the HIV reservoir. And by reservoir, we mean the number of HIV-infected cells that persist in patients who are getting suppressive antiretroviral treatment. An example for this is shown here, where you can see that the number of HIV-infected cells that encode for absolutely identical viral sequences, that's the way how these clonally expanded CD4 cells are being analyzed, is actually increasing over time. And what this means is that whenever HIV-infected cells are dividing or proliferating, which happens all the time and is something that happens. Whenever that happens, then HIV gets amplified. So in a way, the human immune system is acting sort of as a PCR machine that's continuously amplifying the number of HIV-infected cells in our system. And that's an observation that's not just relevant from an academic perspective. It really has implications for what can we do about reducing viral reservoirs. What's also been recognized is that a large proportion of these viruses that are amplified by clonal expansions are defective. It's about 90% of those cells are defective, and for a long time it's been argued that this is actually good news. These are defective sequences that we don't need to worry about, but that perspective has recently changed. There's one very interesting presentation here at this meeting which showed that these defective proviruses, for example this one here, so this is a defective virus that has a defect here in the viral envelope sequence, that these defective proviruses can still do a lot. They can produce HIV RNA, they can produce HIV protein, and it's reasonable to assume that these types of gene products that are coming from defective viruses can still have an influence on the immune system, can contribute to immune activation, and also potentially distract immune responses. I'm going to switch to some immunology work that was presented at this meeting. So this is a presentation here that analyzed HIV-specific CD8 T-cell responses in persons who had hyperacute HIV infection. This is a cohort of people recruited in Durban by a very sophisticated screening approach who were identified at a time, so sort of in the range of 5 to 10 days after viral transmission. And the investigators of this particular study here showed that even at these very and extremely early stages of HIV infection, you can detect HIV-specific CD8 T cells in very strong quantities. And what they also observed was that early treatment initiation preserves the functionality of these cells. In this case, it was interferon gamma secretion. So that's one more reason to believe that early treatment, as early as possible, preserves immune function and might be beneficial to patients. I'm briefly going to talk about a couple of studies in non-human primates. There were a number of really interesting presentations. This one here is by George Pavlakis on the use of recombinant IL-15 in SIV-infected rhesus macaques. George Pavlakis has pioneered this particular area of investigation for many years, and the presentation that was shown here at this meeting showed that interleukin 15, when it's given to SIV-infected macaques that are simultaneously getting ART, that it really has a number of beneficial effects on the T-cell response against HIV. So, for example, HIV-specific T-cells in these treated animals are having increased cytotoxic properties. They can proliferate better, and they are also better at trafficking, so they can get more effectively into the lymph nodes of HIV-infected, of SIV-infected rhesus macaques. There was a similar study that also used IL-15 presented by Jonas Sasha, and they had an opportunity to look or zoom down a little bit more on these lymph nodes and see what's happening. And they ended up showing that the SIV-specific CD8 T cells that typically are not having a possibility to get into these germinal centers, they are sort of restricted under normal conditions. But what IL-15 does, it gives these types of immune cells sort of an ability to penetrate the germinal centers of lymph nodes, and that's where all the action is happening. That's where all the HIV-infected cells are hiding. And these types of mechanisms could be very beneficial, and I would predict that these types of studies that were presented here at this meeting are serving as a very strong rationale for moving IL-15 into human clinical studies and seeing what kind of beneficial effects it might have under these conditions. I briefly wanted to comment on additional data that were presented on antibodies against alpha-4 beta-7 in the context of SIV infection. This relates to a study that was published last year. Essentially, alpha-4 beta-7 is a co-receptor for HIV. It's expressed on CD4 cells, mostly on CD4 cells that are sitting in mucosal tissues or in intestinal tissues. And what was shown last year is that if you give an antibody to this particular co-receptors to SIV-infected rhesus macaques, so simultaneously getting ART and then stop ART, then these animals who are getting the antibody or have received the antibody, they for some reason spontaneously control SIV replication, and the animals that received control antibody had sort of normal expected disease progression. So this particular observation was quite influential. There's now a number of, I believe it's up to 17 different types of human studies with this type of antibody that are being considered. And at the same time, nobody really understands what's going on here and what is the mechanism for this type of immune control that's observed in these types of monkeys. So data presented here at this meeting shed a little bit more light on it. They tried to identify lymphocyte subpopulations that are relevant for this type of immune control that is detectable in these types of monkeys, and it was shown that an antibody that is depleting CD8 cells, NKT cells, and NK cells sort of abrogates this type of immune control and leads to disruption to viral blips. So that is consistent with the perspective that cell-mediated immunity is influencing viral control in these types of animals. And I'm guessing that has implications for these human studies with alpha-4 beta-7 antibodies that are in preparation and in planning right now. I'm briefly switching to human studies and translational studies. So one interesting case report that was presented here is about the so-called South African baby. In brief, the story about this kid is that it was acquired HIV perinatally in South Africa. It was started on antiretroviral treatment. 8 weeks later, it completed about a year of antiretroviral treatment and then stopped treatment and has since then naturally controlled HIV for about 8 years. So a very perplexing and at the same time fascinating case that complements a series of similar cases that has been presented in the past, although most of these cases were presented in adults and not in kids. It really raises this question, what is going on in these kids? And the investigators of this particular abstract here, they did a very good job in evaluating a couple of options. So they showed that there's no protective HLA class I alleles present in this patient. There's very weak T and B cell responses, and the reservoir was very low. But we still obviously don't understand what is responsible for this very unexpected type of disease course. So I believe what we can conclude from these types of studies is, first of all, a sustained drug-free remission of HIV it's not a sort of intellectual consideration. It's actually something that's happening in real life. It happens like today, right now, and it gives a perspective for being able to do this in larger numbers of patients if we better understand what's going on. So I believe we have to take this opportunity and use new concepts, new ideas, new technologies, and really put these types of patients as a high priority for understanding how can we, what is the immune system and what is going on in these patients. There was a second case report, again, on hyperacute infection. In this case, it was a patient who was identified in some type of screening program in San Francisco. The patient was very rapidly started on ART within like a couple of days after HIV transmission, then completed treatment for 3 years and then stopped treatment and subsequently rebounded about 240 days later. So this is an interesting case because it shows even these extremely small reservoirs that are detectable in patients who are getting started on treatment as early as possible, they have a reservoir that's still able to cause viral rebound. In this case, it was estimated that about 200 HIV-infected cells were present, like in the entire system of the patients. Out of these billions of cells that are in patients, 200 were HIV-infected, and those were apparently sufficient to induce viral rebound. So if we are talking about HIV eradication, it probably means we have to get rid of every single cell, which obviously is extremely difficult. I wanted to finish by talking about data from a therapeutic vaccination study that was presented here. It was a study that involved about 30 HIV-infected patients, all on ART treatment, and they gave about 15 of these patients got a therapeutic vaccine. 15 of these patients were placebo patients. The type of therapeutic vaccine that was used in this context, what I would say is sort of like a mega vaccine. It included 5 different HIV genes. It included IL-12 as an adjuvant. It was repetitively administered, and there were boosters given, and at the same time it was administered by some type of percutaneous electroporation, sort of like a gene gun. So sort of a lot of intervention done, and the primary outcome of this study was treatment control, like viral control in the setting of treatment discontinuation. And what came out of this is that there was really no difference at all between vaccine recipients and placebo recipients. The reason why this is important is if you look at just at the vaccine group, you could imagine that maybe in a couple of patients the vaccine is actually doing something, but if you look at the control group, it's actually, the control group looks a little bit better. There's 2 patients in the control group who did not yet meet criteria for treatment initiation and remain off ARV. So this, in a way, highlights the importance of having adequate control groups, even in very small, sort of pathogenesis-oriented clinical studies. What's also important to know here is that therapeutic vaccination is really, I mean, this is not an exception here. There were a number of previous therapeutic vaccination studies that did not show much. It's really showing that therapeutic vaccination is having a problem and might not be something that can be very much pursued in the future. There was one interesting observation in this study here that related to biomarkers associated with viral rebound time, and it interestingly appeared that viral reservoir markers were the types of the types of biomarkers that were most closely associated with viral rebound. You can see here that cell-associated HIV DNA, which we know is sort of 95% effective, showed no association, but cell-associated HIV RNA was inversely associated with time to viral rebound, and also replication-competent HIV measured in an outgrowth assays showed a trend for statistical association with viral rebound time. So if we had an opportunity to effectively reduce viral reservoirs, I believe there's reasons to believe that this could actually translate into delayed viral rebound and gives a little bit of hope for future work. Let me finish by highlighting all the people who have been working on this. I had this opportunity to work with this group of young investigators over the last couple of days in this Rapporteur group. It's been a lot of fun and a great experience for myself. So thank you very much, and thanks to you for participating in the conference.
I've got to say that was great by Matthias and his team, a fantastic summary of some of the great science that we've seen at this meeting. We're now going to move on to track B. I may have to try and use the computer here, if I can. Anyway, while we're trying to sort that out, do you want to do that?
On the presentation.
Oh. Great, thanks. Oh, we have to go back one, I think. That's not me. Could you come back, please, and sort this out? So, because you know, technology when you're standing here in front of a lot of people always gets a bit difficult. Great, okay. I hope that's the right first slide. I'll let Paula sort that out. So I'd like to introduce, first of all, the lead rapporteur for Track B, Paula Munderi. And really, you couldn't ask for a really more expert person to lead the rapporteur team than Paula. She's a clinical scientist recently based at the Uganda Virus Research Institute, where she headed the establishment of a program in HIV care research for the Medical Research Council. Dr. Munderi was the lead investigator on several multi-site studies on HIV treatment strategy, including the DART trial, the SALIF study, and the START trial. I must admit they're pretty impressive studies. So please welcome Paula to the stage. Paula.
Thank you, Anton, for that kind introduction. And thank you very much, my friends in the Track B Program Committee, for inviting me to rapporteur the session, although I think after this week I'll probably be unfriending a lot of you. I was assisted in this task by a stellar team of seriously clever young people. So thank you, Denise. Thank you, Lara. Thank you, Vince, for all your hard work in rapporteuring the clinical track. The clinical sciences track set out to address a very wide-ranging array of themes in the clinical sciences area, including choice and maintenance of antiretroviral treatment, new developments in the diagnosis and management of HIV and associated opportunistic infections, cancers, and other co-infections. There was some material on HIV-related inflammation and immune activation, as you've just heard from the previous speaker. There were sessions on aging and HIV, comorbidities, drug-related toxicities and long-term treatment, and sessions addressing clinical care issues of key populations and the subgroups. In all, our team saw 64 oral presentations alone in 6 oral abstract sessions and 4 poster discussion sessions, including several cross-track sessions, several symposium sessions. I'm saying this to say that in 12 minutes it is absolutely impossible to resume everything and all the richness of the science that was presented in the clinical track. So any notable omissions are mine. It was indeed a very interesting week. So we wanted to highlight some of the new data from phase 3 studies, specifically on fixed-dose combinations, new fixed-dose combinations, or novel fixed-dose combinations for treatment-naive adults. The first one of these studies is presented by Joel Gallant and colleagues. They evaluated a combination of bictegravir in combination with emtricitabine and tenofovir alafenamide versus dolutegravir, abacavir, and lamivudine. The primary endpoint assessment at 48 weeks confirms that the bictegravir single tablet regimen was non-inferior to the dolutegravir, abacavir 3TC. Importantly, the regimen was extremely well tolerated, and they recorded no treatment emergent resistance or treatment limiting side effects. Confirming the efficacy of the same single tablet regimen, Paul Sachs and colleagues also presented their study at this conference, and the comparison in their trial is with dolutegravir and FTAF given once a day. This shows the week 48 efficacy and outcome, again confirming non-inferiority with a combination of dolutegravir and FTAF. Once again, no resistance to any components of the treatment regimens occurred, and the non-inferiority was confirmed in sensitivity analysis. The drive-ahead study, I like the name of that study, presented by Kathleen Squires and her group. They evaluated a novel non-nucleoside reverse transcriptase inhibitor, doravirine, in combination with lamivudine and tenofovir, and compared this to what is probably standard of care in a lot of places, which is the efavirenz-based FTC-TDF triple combination. The week 48 efficacy by subgroup is interesting because the doravirine combination seems to is non-inferior and is as effective in patients with high and low viral loads, aside from being effective in situations where NNRTI mutations are high. The other lot of studies that the group thought were interesting were new data on switch strategies and new data on drug optimization. In our quest to find ever better solutions for patients on long-term treatments, increasing opportunities to switch either for toxicity or to optimize drug dosages are always being sought by clinical scientists. So the MRR trial, Jean-Michel Molina and his colleagues presented the interim analysis on what is the first fixed-dose combination that contains a protease inhibitor. So the combination is darunavir, cobicistat, and FTAF. This was a switch study, and the control group continued their boosted protease inhibitor regimen with emtricitabine and tenofovir. Uh, 24 weeks interim data show excellent efficacy of this novel fixed-dose combination. There were some rebounders, and most of them resuppressed to below 50 copies per ml by week 24. But the investigators do note that there were no confound rebounds above 200 copies per ml, and therefore no discontinuations yet for virologic failure. Most importantly, at this early stage of 6 months, they have not yet observed any major protease inhibitor-related drug resistance mutations. In a different direction, Marta Bofito presented some reassuring data on the reduced dose efavirenz, the 400 milligram formulation in pregnant women living with HIV. This is against the background of the ANCHOR study that had showed the efficacy of the lower dose of efavirenz, but widespread use of efavirenz was still limited by the fact that we did not know whether it was safe in pregnancy. These slides, I go over them very quickly, show the PK parameters. Suffice it to note that the PK parameters were comparable to those seen in the ANCHOR study, which is the reference pharmacokinetic study. And the pharmacodynamic and this slide shows the therapeutic drug levels of efavirenz. It looks like a very, very busy painting, but what it actually shows is that therapeutic drug levels are quite well maintained over all the testing visits, and even the couple of slow metabolizers who were in the study sample maintained acceptable therapeutic drug levels. The investigators note that all subjects maintained a low viral load copies, and all the newborns were HIV negative, and suggest that efavirenz 400 may be safe to use in pregnant women with HIV. Then this morning, as we were preparing to finish our conversation, there was a very interesting conversation in a symposium numbered there, and several eminent clinical scientists were answering a question: do we need triple therapy for everyone for life? This is a question that not only scientists ask, but patients as well. So there are two dual therapy studies with dolutegravir and lamivudine. The PADO study, which had been presented before, which showed at 48 weeks the viral load decay, as you can see in that table. But in this conference, in a poster, Figueroa presented the 96-week data on 18 patients. There's still no virological failure and only one SAE, which was unrelated to the treatment. The same regimen, dolutegravir and lamivudine in naive patients, is evaluated in the ACTG 5353 trial. This shows the poster presentation, which was presented by Taiwo at the conference. And again, satisfactory rates of virologic suppression from a dual regimen of dolutegravir and 3-TC. Moving on to hepatitis C and HIV co-infection, Karine Lacombe presented efficacy and safety data on a novel combination, glecaprevir, pibrentasvir. I can't actually say that name, so let's just call it GP. Interestingly, she evaluated patients who are co-infected with hepatitis C, both with and without cirrhosis. And the results are quite encouraging in that the SVR at 12 weeks is quite high and is maintained through 8 to 12 weeks in people with or without cirrhosis. 99% SVR at 12 weeks with an 8-week treatment of GP in patients who didn't have cirrhosis, to be specific. This is probably going to be the shortest hepatitis B HCV treatment available. It is pan-genotypic, effective against many genotypes, and the safety data were encouraging as well in that GP was very well tolerated in both patients with and without liver cirrhosis. With all that good news, there's still a word of caution, specifically from WHO, who at this conference this week launched the Global Action Plan on HIV drug resistance. They noted in the symposium that pre-treatment drug resistance was becoming an increasing problem worldwide, but especially in Eastern and Southern Africa. So there was a multi-country study involving Uganda, Namibia, Zimbabwe, Nicaragua, Guatemala, and Argentina, showing that in adults, most of these countries had baseline PDR rates over 10%. Probably even more worrying was a multi-country study again in those countries listed there, showing PDR rates in infants below 18 months of 50 to 55%. So we do have a number of treatment options, ART regimens for patients that are simpler, more efficacious, and better tolerated. There was a promising new treatment presented for HCV co-infection, but sobering data from WHO global HIV drug resistance surveillance data. Thank you to all the great clinical scientists out there for all the work you do. And thank you to the team.
Thank you so much for that review of the clinical track, which of course is very close to my heart. And now we're going to move to the rapporteur of track C, who is Professor François Dabi. And it's great in his biography. He starts off, he's a medical doctor. He's also the Professor of Epidemiology at the School of Public Health of the University of Bordeaux in France. And recently, from March 2017, he's become the Director of the French Public Research Agency for HIV and Viral Hepatitis, who we all know as ANRS. Professor Dabi has 30 years of experience in research on HIV epidemiology and global health. His scientific interest is on the public health challenges of HIV prevention and care, prevention of mother-to-child transmission, and now universal test and treat in Africa, and outcomes in antiretroviral treated adults and children in West Africa. And in general, mainly in implementation science in resource-limited settings. Professor Dabi has been deeply involved in guideline development for the WHO and for France over the past 10 years. So please welcome François to the stage.
Good evening. I'm very pleased and honored to be to have this report on prevention science here at the conference, and I would have been unable to do it without the tremendous help of my co-rapporteurs, Melanie, Jeremy, and Collins. In fact, they have done most of the job, and they could do easily the presentation instead of me. I'll start by a personal note, because when we announced that the conference was in Paris in July, I was extremely pleased, because you know, July in France, we had our revolution. We took over Bastille, and this is our national day on Bastille Day on the 14th of July. And then I remember that in 2003, when the conference started, this was the opening, it was the Bastille Day. It was exactly that day. And Nelson Mandela was the guest of our president at the time, and both of them came to open this conference. So Linda Gale and Jean-François, you did not organize a conference to have the opening on Bastille Day. It's a pity, because I think we should have had an interesting encounter if it was on Bastille Day of this year. But in fact, you took us 2 weeks later because you wanted us to do another revolution, and that's the prevention revolution. And that, I'm quoting here Linda Gale's favorite slogan during this week, the prevention revolution, and the way science brings prevention revolution. So prevention revolution, as you know, is a chaotic event. Sometimes it's hard to follow. And we, as a group, we had plenty of material to review, exactly what I have here, and we have selected a few to give you a flavor of what the prevention revolution was during this conference. And we have organized this into 5 different domains. The first domain was testing. And clearly, most of the interesting work on testing in this conference, or at least part of the interesting work, was on self-testing, which clearly appears to contribute to achieve the first 90 objective. An interesting trial in Zambia showed that when you introduce self-testing in a community, you increase knowledge of HIV status. And very interestingly, it works particularly well for males, plus 31%, for young adults, plus 31%, and for those who had not been tested before, plus 76%. Few social harm reported, no self-harm, and secondary distribution of self-testing within couples was feasible and with good yield. So that's very good news. Also, another self-testing trial on internet-recruited MSM in the US brought very also positive and encouraging results. The provision of free HIV rapid tests, increasing the frequency of HIV screening among internet-recruited MSM, increased their awareness of HIV infection and may not result in increased sexually risk behaviors. Let's move to the second dimension, treatment as prevention. Great science at this conference. The great science tells us that universal treatment works in male homosexual couples as well as heterosexual couples in reducing transmission. And this comes from the Kirby Institute study that was conducted all over the world. What they did a large prospective longitudinal cohort of 358 MSM couples followed for 591 years on 3 continents. And what did they observe? No linked transmission in homosexual male serodiscordant couples whose seropositive partner was on treatment and had reached undetectable viral load. They also observed 3 non-linked transmissions in these non-monogamous couples, and that really tells us that PrEP has also a role to play in these circumstances. Let's move to pre-exposure prophylaxis, PrEP, and that's probably where most of the science, new science, was interesting also in this conference. First of all, we had good evidence in this conference that we are getting much stronger on-demand PrEP in real life, in less than optimal situations, and in resource-limited settings. Let me show you a few examples of that. Let's start by France and Canada. On-demand PrEP with TDF-FTC remains highly effective in MSM having infrequent sexual intercourse and using few pills. So it's an adequate alternative to daily PrEP for those who have high risk but infrequent sexual intercourse. Very interesting experience also in France. We have been rolling out public health program on PrEP for the past year, and we already enrolled more than 3,400 MSM in this PrEP public health program. They preferred on-demand PrEP, and 4 seroconversions were observed, very few, and almost always explained by the circumstances. So this is a low rate, but of course that implies that close monitoring is needed for this population. The same thing happened in Bangkok and New York, where a PrEP, oral PrEP on demand, even sex-driven, was also introduced. Another interesting approach on PrEP was conducted in Lida Gale's group in South Africa, in Cape Town, in trying to introduce it in uninfected adolescents. And this self-selected cohort, appropriate for combination prevention, showed that PrEP was reasonably well tolerated with minimal safety concerns, and the usage and adherence diminished over time, which is a concern. But women were not less adherent than young women, and 1 seroconversion altogether was observed. Finally, an early adopters of PrEP study was conducted in 2 rural communities in Kenya and Uganda, and basically that works as well in terms of acceptability, in terms of feasibility in these very rural settings. But we have also to be slightly worried because the majority of persons identified as high risk neither perceive themselves at risk or were not early adopters. And so barriers to PrEP need to be addressed with new approaches in these hard-to-reach populations. Quickly, to finish the PrEP, topical PrEP continues to be studied with new promising compounds. We just selected one, that the safety and acceptability trial of the dapivirine vaginal ring in US adolescents, safe, acceptable, good adherence, plasma levels and residuals level are satisfactory. The story needs to be continued with this compound. Finally, we had reassuring data on PrEP willingness, retention, and adherence in different settings, at least Brazil and USA, in transgender women. That's one of the target populations on which little had happened, little data was recorded, and we have new information that is solid. Finally, there is also early safety and PK data in cabotegravir and rilpivirine long-acting, and that leads us again to think that these drugs may be used in the future in this indication. Fourth dimension, prevention of mother-to-child transmission. Two interesting findings, one from Botswana, where a combination based on dolutegravir, TDF, and FTC starting in pregnancy was proven to be safe, and as safe as the classical efavirenz TDF, FTC in this nationwide birth outcome surveillance in Botswana. Regarding the relation with topical PrEP, in the context of topical PrEP with dapivirine, breast milk and infant exposure suggests this product is on the safe side, meaning that for women, even if sometimes pregnancy are initiated, this could be solved, as no problem would occur. Finally, population impact. This is really the first conference in which we can see the combination of prevention and treatment impact at the population level and see how it works, and it works beautifully. So this was produced by the study in Swaziland. This was the Swaziland HIV incidence and measurement survey. And look at this. In 2011, there was incidence relatively high, and 6 years later, in 2016, 2017, the decrease in incidence was about 44%, and that works for male as well as for females. And when you look at the community, there was a doubling of viral load suppression among people living with HIV, regardless of awareness of the HIV status and the ERT use. So to finish, the prevention revolution at this conference tells us several things. The first thing is that we can test by all methods, and we have new methods that were evidence-based now after this conference. The second message, and it was well carried by the community leaders in this conference, is the U equal U. Undetectable equals untransmissible. The third message is that we can, without any fear, roll out PrEP services, either continuous or on-demand, in multiple populations all over the world. Fourth, universal ART and combination prevention truly seem to decrease incidence at country level, and probably what has been observed in Swaziland can be repeated elsewhere. And finally, I didn't mention so much vaccine research, but there was translational vaccinology sessions at this conference, and we have seen progress in this field, and this progress means that vaccine research is continuing and is on the right track. So I'd like to thank you very much for your attention for my report.
Wonderful, thank you. And now we come to our fourth and last track, track D, and it's a great pleasure for me to introduce Kate Hankins, who's Deputy Director Science, Amsterdam Institute for Global Health and Development, and Scientific Chair of the annual African Interest Conference. Many of who in the audience here, you go there. She's Professor of Public and Population Health at McGill University and an Honorary Professor at London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. She was formerly the Chief Scientific Advisor to UNAIDS in Geneva. She now chairs the Scientific Advisory Committee of the European and Developing Countries Clinical Trial Partnership, we all know as the EDCTP. She also is on the Advisory Board of CAPRISA in KwaZulu-Natal and the Scientific Advisory Group of the US National Institute of Health's HIV Prevention Trials Network. She's a trustee of the UK HIV Research Trust and member of our International AIDS Society Industry Liaison Forum, and we're very grateful to her to put the work in for that for us. And Kate, this is really a fantastic honour, Kate was named to the Order of Canada in 2013. So please welcome Kate to the stage. Kate.
Great. I want to say from the start that it's a tremendous honor to have been asked to take on the task of rapporteur. It's a lot of work. It's been a big challenge, given the number, the diversity, and the caliber of the implementation science studies that have been presented here in Paris. I've also had a stellar team, very keen and dedicated. We haven't seen much else than the inside of this conference center and our hotel rooms, I must say. They are Glenn Turpin from Senegal, Steph Baral, Kogi Nadu, Carrie Lyons, Carmen Logi, Amrita Rao, and Ben Leestman from Senegal. We have no conflicts of interest to declare. So let's start with a quick definition of what we mean when we talk about HIV implementation science. It's a multidisciplinary field that seeks generalizable knowledge about the behavior of stakeholders, organizations, communities, and individuals in order to understand the magnitude, the reasons for, and strategies to close the gap between evidence and routine practice for health in real-world contexts. So key themes that you'll see include multidisciplinarity, something that's generalizable, multiple stakeholders, closing the gap between evidence and practice, and real-world contexts. We looked for innovation in implementation strategies, study designs, and measurement tools and methods, while keeping an eye out for evidence of community and stakeholder engagement and ownership, and signs of integration of the seeds of scalability right from the outset. Now, the potential contribution of HIV self-testing to helping meet the first 90, knowledge of HIV status, was underscored in a number of sessions. So we've chosen one to highlight for you. It's an innovative program in Thailand that recognized that many young men who have sex with men and transgender people connect online to engage in offline risk. The implementation challenge is to convert our online reach to them into offline testing and other service uptake. So the online communication channel is called Adam's Love, and it's engaged high numbers of MSM and transgender people to communicate their sexual health concerns. More than 20,000 referrals have been made to HIV and STI services using e-booking for HIV testing and PrEP. This looks like a concert ticket. And web-based, supervised HIV self-testing. As seen here, integrating community-led health services that are needs-based, demand-driven, and client-centered with online strategies has increased both the access to and the yield of HIV testing, with 48% being first-time testers and 21% found HIV positive. On Sunday evening, we heard from Esther Duflo about behavior change and incentives, and from Sandra Souza Ruby yesterday about economic incentives for HIV prevention in Latin America. A cluster randomized trial of the effectiveness of HIV testing incentives in 4 rural districts in Zimbabwe compared standard community mobilization in 34 outreach communities to standard mobilization plus non-cash incentives for couples HIV testing. As we know, couples HIV testing and counseling has many benefits. In the incentive arm, 1 week prior to outreach visits, clients were offered a choice of one of 3 incentives if they tested together with their partner. Worth about $1.50 each, these were a laundry bar, a petroleum jelly jar, or a bottle of cooking oil. Maginot found that people in the intervention communities were 13 times more likely to test with their partner. Non-financial incentives for couples testing uptake in Zimbabwe were highly cost-effective, with an incremental cost per client tested at about $4 if they got tested as a couple, and per client tested HIV positive of under $50. That's an amazing investment, a small investment and big return. Differentiated care or differentiated service delivery, called DSD, was the focus of several sessions. A retrospective study in 6 countries in Southern Africa, reported by Kim, assessed aggregate clinical outcome data for children and adolescents 0 to 19 years on ART. Of more than 20,000 patients, 26% had monthly prescriptions, here that's called MP, and 74% had multi-month prescriptions, MMP. The study found that MMP patients had lower mortality, less loss to follow-up, superior ART adherence, and better response to ART by CD4 and viral load measurements. Analyses by country and by disaggregated age groups yielded broadly similar findings. Now, we chose this abstract before we knew who was going to win the Track D award today. So the challenge is to determine how best to decide which clients are best suited to differentiated service delivery. In Malawi, the National ART Guidelines have supported 3-month refills for stable adult patients since 2008. This study of multi-month refills of antiretroviral drugs for stable patients, presented by Margaret Proust, as I mentioned, who won the Lang van Tongeren Award for our track earlier today, assessed the accuracy in the application of eligibility criteria at the health facility level. So inaccurate patient differentiation can limit the benefits of multi-month scripts and present risks. Of 65,000 eligible people, 27% could have benefited, making efficiency gains less than optimal if they had benefited. On the other side, 42% of ineligible people were getting multi-month scripts when they did not meet criteria for time on ART, or viral load, or treatment regimen, a potential danger for them. Incorrect patient differentiation was associated with both facility-level and patient-level factors. Lack of knowledge about the policy, provider concerns about multi-month scripts, low drug stocks, and poor adherence not being captured in the study's eligibility measures meant that some eligible patients were excluded. Lack of understanding of the criteria, attempts to reduce workload, unrecognized transitions to ineligibility, and patient requests to be included led to failure to exclude ineligible clients. Healthcare worker training and alignment of patient record systems with the eligibility criteria for differentiated care could help reduce the errors in patient triage. The options and challenges of service integration for people who inject drugs in Vietnam were highlighted by Lee Min Young. Optimal implementation strategies for integrating drug use and HIV prevention and treatment services include abandoning compulsory detention centers, which is what Vietnam has done, in favor of co-locating methadone maintenance or Suboxone, that's buprenorphine and naloxone, opioid substitution with HIV clinics. In the DRIVE study, members of community-based organizations support recruitment, referral, and navigation in methadone maintenance and HIV care services. Challenges include overburdened HIV staff who are reluctant to see medication-assisted treatment patients daily and 7 days a week. There's also some stigma among HIV providers. This is not in my professional backyard. The People Living with HIV Stigma Index measures trends in stigma discrimination to promote action to reduce stigma. It has been revised to account for new dynamics such as treatment on diagnosis and PrEP, and has been tailored for key populations. These data from Uganda and Senegal presented by Wolf reveal that both men who have sex with men and sex workers living with HIV fear health services, likely due to anticipated stigma, and avoid seeking health care. Notably, these key populations experience high levels of physical, verbal, and sexual violence. Barral presented an integrated stigma mitigation intervention framework for key populations. It describes the interventions, the expected effect on stigma, and the outcomes at individual, service level, and community level. Lynn presented a conjoint analysis, and we had never even heard of this when we were reviewing the abstracts. It's a marketing tool. And she presented a conjoint analysis demonstrating how this marketing tool can be used to better understand what factors influence the decision-making of hospital directors. So it's a statistical technique that determines how consumers value different features of a product when making a purchase. And the example she gave in the session was buying a house. So you're going to look at, maybe you're going to look at how far it is away from the schools, you're going to look at transport, yes, you're going to look at price, all of those other things. So what conjoint analysis does, it presents a bundle of features to force the respondent to make trade-off decisions. This study found that the most important features affecting decisions to adopt an evidence-based stigma reduction intervention in this hospital setting in China were cost and training flexibility. Modi et al. Examined the impact of expanding treatment eligibility on ART initiation and retention in care in patients in Zambia using a regression discontinuity design to estimate the real-world effects of guideline implementation. They compared patients enrolling just before and just after the change. They then used implementation of new guidelines as an instrumental variable to estimate the effect of ART initiation on retention in care at 6 months. A 26.9% increase in retention in care was seen among those who were newly eligible, whether by CD4 count or because they qualified for option B+. But perhaps surprisingly, there was a 29.1% increase in retention of those who were not yet eligible because they had CD4 counts above 500. This kind of analysis can actually help in planning procurement of drugs and staffing requirements when policies change. Now, maybe this is no news to you, but it was a bit news to me that we actually crossed a threshold in 2014 when cell phone subscriptions surpassed the world population. And you can see it's people in low and middle income countries that are driving this. So in a session on harnessing the promise of mobile technologies for effective program implementation, we looked first of all at MTIBA. 1 million people in Kenya and 370 clinics are now connected through the MTIBA Health Wallet that links patients, providers, and payers. Patients can now save and receive money that is dedicated for healthcare only through their phone. They can send money to others in need and spend money and entitlements for healthcare, reducing their out-of-pocket expenditures. MTIBA reduces transaction costs, increases transparency, and creates actionable data for healthcare facilities and for insurers. Over 450,000 MAMA users in South Africa receive daily text messages filled with tips and reminders about the health of their babies. Electronic adherence monitors we know about, such as MEMS caps and the Wise Pill, send messages to a server when a pill bottle is opened. The 99 Dots program relies on self-reported dosing. Patients call a different toll-free phone number that is revealed when they take their second pill each day. The combination of the caller ID and the numbers called shows that doses are in the patient's hands. They receive SMS reminders, and healthcare workers receive day-to-day adherence data via cell phone that can help tailor counseling. Perhaps the most novel is the ingestion event monitor. This is a wirelessly observed therapy in which you take a pill that has a chip in it, a sensor in it, and when it hits stomach acid, it sends a message via Bluetooth to a patch that you have on your arm that then communicates with your with the server and the patient's cell phone, and that goes to a web-based interface for the healthcare provider that's monitoring the adherence. I don't know where this is going to go, but you can imagine that cost, acceptability, and stigma may limit application of the technology. So whatever choice of mHealth tool, and we're going there big time into mHealth, as you all know, will depend on the goals, the setting, and the available resources. Blower presented an interesting method to obtain data to evaluate the feasibility of achieving 90-90-90 in Malawi. So the geographic location of all people living with HIV in Malawi, both diagnosed and undiagnosed, was determined by creating a density of infection map using 3 sources of information. So there was a settlement and population density map, an age structure map, and an epidemic surveillance prevalence map based on the 2015 Malawi Demographic and Health Survey. So with a population of 16 million, 3 regions and 4 major cities, Malawi has an HIV prevalence of about 9%. About 725,000 people aged 15 to 49 are living with HIV. 80% of them are in rural areas. And as this map shows, the density of infection varies from 1 person living with HIV per kilometer squared to more than 1,000 per kilometer squared. And geographically, it varies from 2 in the north, 4 in the central region, and 10 in the south regions. There was a very spirited debate in the session at which these data were presented, because if you want to be really cost effective, you're just going to go to high density, offer HIV testing and treatment, and get your 90-90-90 as quick as you can. But if you believe, as most of us do, in treatment equity, this kind of information is going to be more likely to be used for you to design strategies that are different according to the density of the population. So more mobile outreach, more rural type strategies would be required. So implementation science is moving forward. It's moving from let it work to help it work to make it work. And the research questions are efficacy, so doing A versus nothing in a controlled setting, effectiveness, doing A versus nothing in a less than controlled setting, comparative effectiveness of static interventions, like comparing A versus B, but alternatively, there are discussions now about how to use A and B together adaptively. So a sequential multiple assignment randomized controlled trial would be called a SMART trial, might be able to do this for us. It would mimic real-world practice by starting with less effective but less toxic, less expensive interventions, and then escalating, switching, augmenting among non-responders. And the kind of questions we could ask is, what should be given to everyone in the prevention cascade? What should be used to get those who fail or fall back in the treatment cascade? And what is the best cost-effective overall strategy for prevention and treatment? And this is a complicated little example of what the trial might look like, what this kind of an adaptive trial might look like. So I just want to finish by saying that community and stakeholder engagement and ownership and scalability were highlighted in successful interventions and proven ones. These concepts are articulated in the Paris Community Declaration, engage key affected population representatives in research ethics committees, protocol teams, and in research agenda setting, and share results with communities involved. And the good participatory practices principles, the GPP principles that serve as the foundation for these relationships, include respect, mutual understanding, integrity, transparency, accountability, and stakeholder autonomy. The guidelines and tools can be found at avac.org, and it just reminds us of this basic tenet of nothing about us without us. And I just want to, my last slide is just to shout out to the U.S. National Institutes of Health Fogarty International Center that has trained hundreds of researchers, program managers, and policymakers who conduct and rely on the results of implementation science. The signatories of this letter published in The Lancet wrote, "Infectious disease threats have no nationality and respect no borders, even those of countries that restrict immigration. As a major beneficiary of global health initiatives, the U.S. should value and expand the work of the Fogarty Center as a major contributor to global health capacity within the U.S. and internationally. I want to be sure that Fogarty funding is absolutely assured before I take off this Fogarty wristband that I've been wearing since May. You can almost not see the word Fogarty anymore. I've been wearing it 24/7 until we know for sure that Fogarty is funded." Thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Kate, and I hope that wristband can come off very soon indeed. Next up, we're going to hear from our community speaker, Yves Yomb. Yves Yomb is an openly gay leader and sexual minorities human rights activist. He's been involved in LGBTI activism in Cameroon, his country, since 2005, 1 year before becoming aware of his HIV-positive status. In 2011, he became the executive director of Alternatives Cameroon, a local organization promoting the access to health and rights of LGBTI. He's now the prevention unit coordinator of that organization. Yvion was involved in the founding of the network Africa Gay contre le Sida and has been serving as its coordinator since February 2016. So with great pleasure, we introduce Yves to you. Thanks, Yves.
Bonsoir à tous. Good evening, everybody. My name is Yves, and as you surely know, I'm gay. I'm from Cameroon. Although my country continues to discriminate against gay people and put us in jail, the situation is improving. This change is from the support of AMFA, SIDAction, and AIDS. Without their initial support, the fight for LGBT rights and against AIDS could have been lost. Thank you for believing in us. I also want to thank international organizations like the Global Fund and PEPFAR, the bilateral donor country contributing in Cameroon, for funding advocacy, human rights, and research that are helping us win the fight against AIDS. Without PEPFAR, we will not have data on the prevalence of HIV among key population, in particular, men who have sex with men and female sex workers. This knowledge has helped us advocate for treatment and support services for those who are most in need. Also important is the support from the Global Fund that provided us with ART, which has saved many lives. Without this support, I would not be standing here today. Thank you. I have been living with HIV for 10 years. I want to share with you our work at Alternative Cameroon. We are involved in advocacy to improve the right to health of LGBT in Cameroon. To understand the context of our world, let me describe to you what it's like to be gay in my country. Still today in Cameroon, people think that the decline of society is caused by homosexuality. Consider the infamous affair of 2005, when the media published a list of famous people supposed to be homosexual and described them as being responsible for all the evil in society. How could I talk about my sexuality in this setting? Who could I talk to? It is at this time that we created a solidarity network which gave another dimension to homosexuality than homophobia. For the first time in our life, we dare to be ourselves. We share information, offer each other support, and benefited from help that we had learned never to expect. This was the beginning of the organization Alternative Cameroon, whose mission is to defend the right of sexual minorities. And this was also the beginning of my commitment to the community. We are in the most optimistic time in HIV. We have technology that can effectively prevent HIV infection and transmission. However, as Esther Duflo presented in the opening plenary, these technologies are remarkable only if they are adopted by community. Understanding the need of community and how to make technologies stick will be our next challenge. Therefore, I would like to take this opportunity to call for greater investment in community and for community to be courageous in doing what is right, even without expertise. It is important to hear community needs and to design a response that fulfills individual needs, a differentiated services delivery approach. I stand in front of you because people believe in me. I became what I am today because people gave me the opportunity to express myself and to show them what I could do. If I managed to do it, other people could do it too. Therefore, I would like to call for more belief in community and trust us to implement our own project. Help us to grow. This is what happened at Alternative Cameroon. Despite our lay approach, we develop our own expertise, and our experience become to resonate beyond the Cameroon border. We facilitate exchange and share our experience elsewhere in Africa. We discovered that by standing together, we were stronger. Perhaps our biggest success is the creation of an African network of organizations supporting MSM called Africa Gay Contre le Sida. Today, I have the honor of coordinating this network. It is an example of self-determination of African community. All too often, important decisions regarding our community are considered to be the exclusive preserve of institutions. Sometimes, they do us the favor of involving us. But many times, this is tokenistic. Standing before you now, I remember community without a voice and remind all of us that should be nothing about us without us. Popularized in Denver in 1985 and subsequently developed by the JIPA principle in Paris in 1994, it is an important reminder that we can only end it together. Our rights are not open to negotiation. We are not asking for favor. Respecting our rights is good, not just our health, but for global public health. If public policy had more consideration for us, this will go hand in hand with greater funding allocated to us. Regardless of their size, community-based organizations are in the best position to implement action amongst key population. This proximity improves efficiency of prevention tools. That is why it is important to allocate funds directly to the community who need them. Even if they mean giving them support in managing their resources, it is crucial that the final beneficiary have access to available funds. Finally, I would like to finish by highlighting how important it is for the scientific community to put key population at the center of research, design, and implementation. Our layman expertise is precious to increase the relevance of projects. Why it is? Because we are closer to reality, to real life. We are in a better position to find the right word, to ask meaningful questions, to pinpoint material, linguistic, moral, practical, and psychological pressure. If we are involved meaningfully, not only will research be adapted better to reality and needs, but the result will be meaningfully to key population themselves. It is about mobilizing them and broadening the social base, which is indispensable for social change. I believe that research is an act of hope. Research can allow us to beat the odds and decide that all is not over. There are always possibilities. One way you can help us keep the possibility open to many people still without a voice and unreached by services is to sign the Paris Community Declaration. As we come to the close to the conference today, I use you to join key affected population living with or affected by HIV. I call on you to join in our common march for equity, solidarity, and the right to health. Thank you for your attention, and sorry for my French speaking.
Yves, thank you so much for that inspiring talk. And now the final highlight of our conference, and it's to welcome our IAS 2017 conference co-chairs, Linda Gale Becker and Jean-François Delfrézy, to the stage. Please.
Well, IAS 2017, how are you feeling? In my country, we say halala, which means hurrah. And I must say, I think we've had a tremendous week here in the City of Love. Paris has been wonderful and beautiful and awe-inspiring in every way. I've really felt, as I've walked through the halls, an electricity in the air, and I hope you have felt that too. My diagnosis is conference regeneration, and I hope you have all had a really substantial dose to tide you over during the hard-working months until we meet again. A wonderful meeting like this needs many thanks to many people, and I'll try and get through them very quickly. First, of course, to my co-chair, Jean-François Delfrézy. You and the wonderful team at the ANRS have been terrific partners and very gracious hosts at this meeting. Thank you. Thank you to the members of the IAS 2017 Coordinating Committee, the wonderful track chairs, their terrific track members, and all the colleagues who reviewed and scored abstracts and late breakers. Our record number of submissions meant that everyone had a lion's share, but I did not hear one single complaint, to my face at least. Owen, wise beyond your years and an asset to our organization, a huge thank you to you at the IAS, Megan, and all of the incredible staff at the International AIDS Society for running this massive gathering so smoothly and professionally. Thank you also for all the hard work you do in between conferences. Carrie, thanks for looking after me so well, and Robin, thank you for being here this evening. We have seen an amazing array of science this week: basic, clinical, social, translational, implementational, and policy informing. Thank you to all of you who shared your research this week. I know many of you traveled great distances. It's great to have you here to discuss those findings in person. At this conference, we heard 9 insightful, considered, thoughtful plenaries, great special sessions, and wonderful rich symposia and sessions. There were excellent and innovative workshops and many, many meetings. A packed, I'm sure you will agree, but productive 4 days. Congratulations, you have all worked so hard. Thank you also to our plenary and session chairs, facilitators, and moderators. Thank you also to the many faithful and new young journalists who attended IAS 2017, I believe more than 400, who also worked from afar to make sure these endeavors and results were picked up here and shared with the world. A most extraordinary display of media coverage of our conference this week. Mandy, thank you to you and your team for guiding that process so expertly. I also want to thank the myriads of volunteers, all so willing and patient. We hope you had fun. And thank you to the masterful security team, working quietly behind the scenes to put our minds at rest and to keep us safe. Now, members of the IAS, this is your organization. I want to remind you we believe in science, in people, and in progress. Over the past few days, we have heard firsthand from the world's leading experts on HIV, cancer, hepatitis, and we have heard or viewed more than 1,700 submissions of excellent science. Thanks to the brilliant rapporteurs and their teams for a thorough job, you have just heard 4 great summaries that give a snapshot of the depth and breadth of that science. As science goes, I am very optimistic. Despite the funding challenges articulated so well this week, I'm very excited that despite those limitations, science continues to flourish, and science must and will prevail. The Paris Declaration will live on beyond this conference, and we recognize there the need for ongoing research towards an HIV vaccine, a functional cure, the basic science to support this, and other aspects of HIV understanding, novel drugs and therapies, better prevention, robust science on the economics of the HIV epidemic. This week, I've been excited to see us breaking out of our silos. At the Curing Cancer Forum and the co-infection meeting this past weekend, we saw how much we can gain by collaborating across specialties and partnering with others working in similar fields. I thought Prof. Honjo's amazing plenary today also brought this home in extraordinary ways. By combining our ideas, creativity, lifting our voices, I believe in the African tradition, we will go so much further together. Which brings me to people. IAS is about people, you, who we are proud to count as our members, and the people we serve to reduce the impact of HIV in their lives, families, communities, and countries. I want to tell you, a record 7,828 of you gathered here this week from 142 countries. We leave today again a united people, ready to stand up together for HIV research and development and for the resources needed to ensure that the work can go on. No one should be left behind. From Venezuela to Uzbekistan, from Hungary to Burkina Faso, whether straight men in South Africa, transgendered people in Colombia, veterans in the USA, migrants in Stockholm. In keeping with the Paris Community Declaration, we will be mindful of the areas and populations who are marginalized, lost, discarded, neglected, and will find ways to compassionately and respectfully draw them into the fold. We have seen better ways to reach all of these in need of testing, treatment, prevention, care, services, and assistance, but I reiterate again, nothing about them without them. And we pledge to continue to join forces with young people. I was struck throughout the week that our award winners were universally young, energetic, and entrepreneurial. At the Changing Gears, Changing Landscapes workshop yesterday, one of the differentiated care youth ambassadors said it best: HIV lives in me, but it also listens to me. We should be listening to young people. The IAS youth ambassadors this week have brought passion and energy. On Sunday, I spoke about a chaotic world. When I see these young people and feel the excitement, I prefer to think about it as an unpredictable and energetic world, full of promise and potential, if we can harness the collective energy and creativity of these young people to change the world for the better. And that brings us to our final value, progress. Unless we combine the science with advocacy, hard work, and all the resources we can muster to turn the findings of this week into progress, our efforts will be in vain. Intentional, considered, smart, collaborative, but deliberate and urgent onward progress will get us closer to the ambitious goals before us. Failure simply isn't an option. So now, we are on the road to Amsterdam, and I am energized when I think of our convening again at AIDS 2018. It is our biennial opportunity to connect the research to advocacy and policy on an even grander scale. My hope is that the work that has already begun will begin to accelerate with a firm resolve to meet some very important goals in the next 12 months. These goals include, importantly, breaking barriers and building bridges to the Eastern European, Central Asian region. We hope to go boldly where others have been fearful to tread. So as we close, we thank the many activists who led by example and took little regard for themselves. We thank the scientists who, through long hours, repeated attempts and hard work, stayed the course to bring us the innovations. Now's the time for us to live up to our dual responsibilities as advocates and scientists. We must be bold. Courage has been the bedrock of our community from the earliest days. Let us channel that bravery and recommit to defending and advancing science and the application of science every day and in every possible way. I am so proud to lead this powerful society. Au revoir and see you in Amsterdam. Over to my co-chair.
Thanks a lot, Linda Gale. It was really a great pleasure to work during the last year for this conference with you. And thanks again.
Thank you.
Bonsoir à tous. Probably not the good guy to say that this conference has been a success, but I think it's really a success. We have over 7,500 registration, and it's great. Many delegates come from resource-limited countries, and it's also very important. The conference basic science sessions were crowded. Great speakers with fantastic discussion, and this was one of the goals and one of the success of Paris 2017. Basic science come back to IAS. Françoise, tu es d'accord avec ça? Very good news about antiretroviral therapy. We have more presentation on heart and clinical trials than at CROI this year. That's true. That's true. First results on the effect of long-acting drugs for treatment and probably more on prevention. Cutting-edge results from real-world users of PrEP. And I can say that finally PrEP on demand, à la française, will offer a great choice for patients. And I think it's a good result from this conference. Great implementation science, and clearly we have discussed that at the opening session, and I say that for me the two priorities were basic science and implementation. And we have a very nice implementation science at this conference. And for the first time, as discussed before, decrease in HIV incidence in 2 African countries. That's a great, splendid result. Finally, I would like to make 4 additional comments. First, we have no vaccine, but we have many interesting results on neutralizing antibodies and correlation between protection and immune response. Second, Paris is a meeting where connection between HIV cure and cancer rarely occur. It's the beginning of a new era. Third, community-based organization and patient association are the keys to push results of science into real life. And fourth, at the political level, we have different ministers of France and other countries at this conference. Linda Gale and I were part of the delegation that met the President Macron on Monday evening, and as discussed by the Ministry of Research, President Macron pointed out the commitment of France, both from a scientific and a financial point of view. It's really important, as we need a strong Now, it's really important, not only for the French community, but also, I think, because France is a leader in the domain of HIV science, so it's important to have politics on board. And it's really important that we need a strong political involvement for the next years. In conclusion, I would like to thank again Linda Gill-Baker. We had very nice collaboration for this conference. Thanks a lot again. The IAS team, very professional, but also the NRS staff, French authorities, et toute la communauté scientifique française et internationale. Je vous dis d'ailleurs au revoir en tant que directeur de la NRS et je suis ravi de l'arrivée de mon successeur, le professeur François Davis. As you may already know, I have been nominated as the President of National Consultative Ethical Committee in France. I will keep a strong link with the HIV community through probably collaboration with NGOs and the association. And finally, good luck to Peter Rice and the city of Amsterdam for the next conference. Bye-bye et à bientôt.